situation of connectedness like we've never seen before. Okay? So radical entrepreneurship is an opportunity, to my mind, and anybody who's come to this mini event tonight understands the need for decentralizing power. Normally, power centralizes where corporate power comes together with government power. So if you look at a simple Venn diagram, two circles, where those things come together, in the overlap lies a space. And that space is usually works to the interests of people who operate in that space. So the question is, how do you dismantle this power? Historically speaking, it's been extremely difficult to dismantle power. It usually has to corrupt itself over many years, starting with the Greeks, the Romans in particular. So there's this really, really smart fellow named Mansur Olson. Okay, and Mansur Olson, this is going to get wonky for a minute, as is my want. Okay, but Mansur Olson had this idea of concentrated benefits dispersed costs. And this is one of the fundamental lessons of public choice theory. For this crowd, you're comfortable with that. If you're not, if you're new to this kind of stuff, it's a little bit inside baseball. But the idea goes like this: when you get crony deals happening, if you have a guy sitting in it with smoking a cigar in the back room of Capitol Hill or the state capitol here in Texas, you get old boys sitting back there and they hammer out a deal, right? Make this regulation, make this subsidy, do something that's going to benefit my industry, and stick the boot in the neck of my competition. And this is a really easy thing to do for certain kind of things, especially if you have some sort of moralistic tail on the other side of it. So during World War II, we had mohair subsidies, right? Where the mohair industry got special treatment, and that is represented in legislation. Well, you don't know that you're paying for mohair subsidies. So if it costs you a penny a year, you're not going to go out and march in the streets against the mohair people, nor are you going to do it for the people who are, working in the military-industrial complex or whatever. Okay. But in any case, these are concentrated benefits. If I can sit down as a lobbyist with a legislator and say, okay, I'll contribute to this campaign, I can do this for you, I can do that for you, and as someone who's in this industry, I know if I can get that competitive advantage in that industry, then someone is going to give me, then I'm going to get special financial rewards for doing that. And in return, there's quid pro quo. The politician or the legislator gets campaign contributions and special protections for hopefully a future incumbency. This kind of crony relationship.
What does it mean?
Has been happening for time immemorial. So the Romans had this happen, the slow corruptive processes. The British Empire eventually collapsed under these pressures and overextending their empire. So the question is, how do you stop it? Because the benefits accrue to very, very tiny group of people who are elites, who are rich elites. The banking industry in the United States is a great example of this, especially the things we've seen in light of 2008. And it seems like there's nothing we can do. There's a feeling of impotence involved in dealing with the problem of crony capitalism. So the logic of this sort of collective action is such that if you have concentrated benefits, you also have dispersed costs. In a democracy, we have no incentive to go march against the one penny that's going to this. The only time we can get any kind of meaningful reform is if the aggregation of all these crony deals occurs to such a degree that it strains the entire democracy or empire or whatever it is, to the point that it cannot financially sustain itself, that people become extremely burdened by whatever it is, the economic processes that corrupting. So what do? Well, enter radical entrepreneurship, okay? Again, the idea here is concentrated benefits, dispersed costs is an unstoppable force, or seemingly so. But what happens when you are able to connect people in such a way that they can collaborate and cooperate without central authority? Suddenly you get a situation in which power, whatever it looks like, wealthy elites, fat cats, politicians, the like, all of these people who hold this power are no longer in control due to massive peer-to-peer networks. This is radical democratization, okay? Good examples of these are already happening. The cartelization of certain industries, like hotel industries, being broken up by the sharing economy with stuff like Airbnb. We're seeing the breakup of taxi cartels, stuff like Lyft and Uber. We're seeing just the beginnings of the financial sector beginning its dissolution through the development of the Bitcoin protocols, right? The blockchain protocol that is the foundation of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network. Anybody not know what Bitcoin is? Because I think that's the best exemplar of what we're talking about in terms of radical entrepreneurship. Because really, all of this stuff can be an offshoot of so many different entrepreneurial ventures can be an offshoot just of Bitcoin, which has the ability to not only unite people in so many different interesting sorts of ways, but it's really not something that powers like. Okay? Now, if you think about decentralization in this way, then the logic that I spoke of before of collective action, which is concentrated benefits, dispersed costs, inverts itself. And that inversion, which is something that was pointed out to me by a good friend of mine, colleague, Carl Ober, it inverts itself. And that inversion means that you get concentrated benefits to the people and dispersed benefits to the people and concentrated costs to the powers. That is a great inversion that is going to fundamentally change the way human beings relate to each other in very positive ways. Now, what's beautiful about such radical entrepreneurship is that it's not partisan. It's popular. It's popular in the sense of the people. It is transpartisan. It is postpartisan. Okay? So, the interesting thing about, have you ever seen the Tea Partiers out there? They're all out there against the government, all this stuff that the government does, right? And the government's in collusion with the crony capitalists. Well, of course, the Tea Partiers emphasize the government. And then on the other side of the political spectrum, you have the Occupy Wall Street folks. And they're all basically griping about the same thing, emphasizing only the corporations at this point. But if you look at this collusion that's happening with the financial sector, for example, it's both. So the oddly, in a transpartisan world, we'll come to see that the Occupy Wall Street people and the Tea Party actually have a great degree of things in common. Now, radical entrepreneurs are going to be on the cutting edge of identifying this and beginning to disrupt and decentralize this power through entrepreneurship. It could be social entrepreneurship, like Lyft, or any manner. It could be social entrepreneurship like Bitcoin. Bitcoin was not developed by someone who was hoping necessarily to get rich. It's open source. Now, I'm sure Satoshi Nakamoto has a whole lot of Bitcoins, but this protocol has an extreme popularization or democratization element that allows all people potentially to become involved. And that's what we're talking about tonight in terms of radical entrepreneurship. I don't want to fail to mention, however, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a form of entrepreneurship where within companies you can make social change. For years we've had the Frederick Taylor model of the firm that was, okay, then we're going to have all these managers at the top of the company, and then we're going to have the middle management, and then we're going to have the peons. And the peons take shit from the bosses, and the middle managers take shit from the big wigs, and that's just the way it's always been. But along comes companies like Morningstar and Valve Software, and so many other good companies that have decided to get rid of hierarchies, get rid of titles. So it's not just about decentralization in the big picture world that is stuff like the sharing economy or Bitcoin and these other tech-enabled things, but it's also about making different human protocols within your organization. And different human protocols within the organization allow you to flourish internally as an organization, prosper and succeed without people who are trying to leverage power and authority over others. It's a much more peaceful state of affairs that works to the advantage of all within the organization. So I encourage you to look up ideas from the Self-Management Institute. There's also an idea called Holacracy. There's a company called Zappos that sells shoes, I think. It is now a holographic organization. And it's basically lateralized relationships, peer-to-peer, where you have cooperative teams, where you don't lord power over each other. It's a peaceful state of affairs. I consider all these new technologies, social technologies, and otherwise, and actual technologies, to be a liberating force for humankind. So finally, I want to end off. I wanted to again, shameless self-promotion for an event that we've got going on that touches on some of the things I'm talking about tonight. That it's a much bigger picture. But the final point I want to make with this conversation about radical entrepreneurship is that we have to change the culture as well. And so part of the thing I want to do is we want to create a culture of peace and non-coercion in all spheres of life. We want to create this, what we call internally, at least Seth and I, opt-out culture. That's why we call ourselves Voice and Exit. It's a long story with respect to how we came up with the name. There's actually some roots to it. But the idea is, very generally speaking, when you have a group of people who are working together collaboratively towards some end, everybody exercises the power of voice to be able to make change. And voice sometimes doesn't work. When it does work, it's great. We all talk, we all collaborate, we all figure out together how to get to a better place where we started. Sometimes that doesn't work. So we have to enable people who want to try something new, just like in the system of open source software, to fork and to establish a new colony, I guess you could say. Try something over here. So that you have a sort of evolutionary stasis with respect to this is what I talked about beforehand. And so it's going to require this new age of connection where we have more lateralized relationships, we have more peaceful interactions, voluntary interactions, is going to have to take place within a cultural context. And it's going to be driven, oddly enough, by geeks, by people who know what Bitcoin is and how it works. And that's going to have to work in tandem. So, in at least in a broad sense, one of the things that Seth and I wanted to do is establishing our radical entrepreneurial venture was to create an event that celebrated peaceful interaction. It celebrated radical innovation, entrepreneurial community, and also at the core of this is well-being, personal well-being. Optimizing on your health. Treating your body and yourself good first, and then going out in concentric circles to your community and in your world. And we think that we can bring something positive to Austin as a cultural hub that is going to be beautiful and is going to celebrate this new way of thinking. And we're probably crazy for trying to do it, but let me give you a little snapshot of that. Are we ready with the sound?
What does it mean to flourish? What does it mean to thrive? What are we moving toward? And what are we leaving behind?
Was that the end of your? Yeah. Could you use my phone?